Right. So these are my day job slides. When I say day job, it's me, it's my company, it's what I do. So I'm going to, can I advance that? Yes, there we go. So that's me. And while you're reading what's on the screen, I'm going to talk about that yellow bike there. So that's, I don't know, I think second generation public hire bike, the OFO brand from mass import from China. I happened to pick one up for 30 quid a few months ago. And what a great little bike it is. It's got mud guards, it's got three-speed hub gear, um, little rack at the front. It's great. The only problem with it is that the saddle goes down gently as you ride it because um, it's got a really weird button. You pull the button and you can go up and down for different people, obviously, because it's a hire bike. So hopefully I can get that tweaked a little bit. But for just nipping down the shops, it's brilliant. Uh, yeah, why can't we have more bikes like that? But what I am going to talk about, I'm just going to go back to that first screen actually, because that's quite interesting. So yeah, last week I was in the Netherlands. Monday got back, managed to put these slides together, which is kind of some of the four little interesting routes that we cycled, and I'll go through some of the details as we get there. And unusually for me, I usually have a few bullet points of things, but this is going to be on the fly with photos pointing at stuff. But this first screen shows a cycle track I first saw in 2015. It runs parallel to the trajectory of the ferry coming into the Hook of Holland. And the first time I visited by ferry, 2015, saw people cycling along there in the blowing wind. And I thought that looks quite interesting. And after about 8 visits, I finally turned left rather than right out the port and went to have a look at it. So there we go. So let's start with a look at what happens on interurban national roads. And by national road, I guess it's the equivalent of a UK two-lane single carriageway, A road, that kind of thing. This is looking at the edge of the town of Ede to Arnhem, which is over in the east of the country. And I'm here to tell you the Netherlands is very hilly over there, which is quite interesting. So let's look at a few photos of N224. Um, so there we are. You can see the road. I'll try and use my mouse over here. There we are. So you can see the road. Yeah, single carriageway. There's a cycle track on both sides. So in theory, one-way cycle tracks, fields on both sides. All very nice there. It's actually up on the plains, very close to where Operation Market Garden took place, where the parachute landings and glider landings were taking place. You can go and read about that yourself. It's all very interesting. Um, but for me, what was quite interesting there is over on the western side of the country, you quite often get roads like this, which are two-way cycle tracks on one side. Here, with flow cycle tracks on both sides of this rural, we would call it a rural A road. Um, Not massively wide, perfectly smooth, despite the trees there. So yeah, you can cycle along these roads between the towns and the villages, and it's all very nice. The trees make a little bit of difference. I mean, not so much with noise, but it's just a bit more attractive. What we did find is some of these routes are very long and very straight, so they can get a bit boring. So if there's a bit of interest there, it's quite nice to stop and have a break. And one particular break was a Dutch, well, we would call it a toucan crossing, probably a sparrow crossing now. But of course, the Dutch have been doing this for ages. This particular location was where the pair of with flow cycle tracks came together at the crossing. And as we go off here, that's a little section of two-way track. So you can see separate walking space, separate cycling space, but it's just a crossing. But quite nice, a lot better than all the toucans we tend to put everywhere. As you get away from this, there isn't a footway because it's just a little local connection between two sides of a village. But all the paths you can walk on, it's fine. Then we have, well, I guess it's one of my pet hates in the UK, but one of my pet loves in the Netherlands. And that's how they do their roundabouts. This is the rural, this isn't interurban. This is no priority for people walking and cycling, all the priority with drivers. But there's a few things we can look at here. There's a couple of photos just to explain this a little bit. So this first photo is where the two-way cycle track crosses one arm of this three-arm roundabout, I think it was. The arm that I'm crossing goes off to the village centre, so that's why the two-way track is on that side. And it's really, really simple. You've got central reservation. Oh, where's my mouse gone? There we go. Central reservation just there. Drivers are fired at the roundabout 90 degrees to the island. The radiuses, as you turn it in and out as a driver, are fairly tight. Little triangles there, give way in the Netherlands. So you're meant to give way to traffic as you cross. But what you find naturally is as you're crossing here, drivers entering the roundabout will quite often just stop and wave you through because they're going slowly anyway. Why wouldn't they? And you can probably just see there's an overrun there in grey. I have a better photo of that in just a second. This is a view from the refuge again, just looking at the roundabout. So you can see from a driver's perspective, you have to use your steering wheel. You can't just go flying into the roundabout and out quickly. Um, you can see the carriageway on the roundabout there is pretty narrow. It still has to get larger vehicles around, but it's pretty narrow. And so what this does is drivers have to tackle this slowly. They can't just fly in and fly out. And consequently, it's much calmer. People have time to pull onto the roundabout. They have time to cross, and the whole thing works really, really well. So I know kind of Dutch style roundabouts are a bit of a thing in the UK at the moment. We're probably on our third or fourth on site at the moment, which is fine. That prioritization for walking and cycling. These rural ones are you give way to traffic, but they're very, very safe. They have a good safety record. And then just one other feature that we can pick up on this photo. You can see me turning my head because I'm looking at the big screen here, but you can see this black car, the camber's running outwards. So that area in the middle is higher, the area on the outside is lower, as well as being dead easy to drain the thing, so all the water goes out to the edge. Drivers going around a bit too quick feel very, very nervous because they've been tipped the wrong way. And that's another speed reducing feature. So that is really, really good. Just in three little photos there. UK roundabouts in this situation would have, let's jump back up. So this one, if this was, yeah, if this was UK, that would probably be two traffic lanes. The crossing point would be over here. You wouldn't have to use the steering wheel very much. The trade-off is the Dutch roundabout can probably get about 25,000 vehicles an hour through it. UK equivalent about 40,000. But the Dutch are doing this primarily for safety. I mean, it's still an interchange, it's still a junction. They're doing it for safety. It's nice and calm, and everybody can get where they need to be. I can't think of the Dutch word, but they have a word which means go more slowly to go faster, which is quite nice. So let's speed on again. A couple more slides for the interurban. So we're getting very close to the carriageway here because we have a bridge. So we don't need to build the bridge wider than it needs to be. And you find this a lot in the Netherlands. They will kind of stick, again, this is a shared path in this situation, but they'll stick these paths on the side of all sorts of bridges, road and rail. You'll find yourself on the edge of a motorway bridge going over a really, really big river, but it's quite pragmatic. So let's use the crossing we're going to build anyway to get people across there on the bike. And this particular junction is going over pretty big motorway interchange. You wouldn't really notice it as you're going over the top. We don't get this in the UK so much. Some pretty hefty safety barriers. So generally, the UK use these to protect drivers, but this is pretty heavy duty because people cycling are going to be very, very close to the road there. So that's quite nice. And then we have floating bus stop that we keep hearing about. They're all dangerous and horrendous. You probably have to walk a few minutes to get this bus at express service on the main road, rather than going to the villages and all around the houses. But from the bus passenger point of view, you do have a proper passenger area. You can wait there in comfort. You can get off the bus, gather your thoughts, and then go walking. I can't remember if this one did, but quite a lot of these bus stops have the odd cycle hoop here and there. So if you want to cycle to the bus stop from an outlying village, you can do that, jump on the bus and head off to the city. And then I think two more for this route. Just as we're hitting Arnhem here, I've put this one in just to prove that there is a hill. That is a really, really steep hill. We only came down it, which was good. If I go to this one, this is so that's looking up the hill. I've turned around looking down the hill, and we've gone from here we go with flow cycle track. That person is actually going the wrong way, but that's fine. It's wide enough. So yeah, with flow cycle tracks, both sides of the road, uh, combining into one two-way cycle track on the far side. Again, another cycle and pedestrian crossing. The reason this one here has got this really weird little section of two-way track is you can come across, bounce up the footway, and get access to Arnhem Station. Uh, that is really steep. People were heavy on the brakes coming down the hill, and we saw at least one person come a cropper as they hit that bend at the bottom. Um, and the person I assume was Dutch, but she was okay. So yes, the perils of Dutch hills. So we've looked at cycling along sort of an interurban A road, but let's look at interurban cycleway, which doesn't require any particular road infrastructure to be bolted on, although there's a little bit, as we'll see at the end here. So this is Arnhem to Nijmegen. This is the F325 fast cycle route. If you look up Bicycle Dutch's blog, he's done a whole thing on this, which is really interesting. I quite often use his blogs to plan where I'm going to have a look because it's all very interesting. So let's start just on the outskirts of Arnhem, heading towards Nijmegen for this particular photo. So we've got lots going on here. Two-way cycle track, floating bus stop, the pedestrian access. You can just see it goes off down a ramp here. So you cross the cycle track to get to the bus stop. I'll come back to those overhead lines in just a second. And then just beyond there is uh, one of the local motorways kind of starting up there. So everything is together. It's in the same corridor to start with. Overhead wires are the only trolley bus in the Netherlands, which I never knew was there. So the future was here many years ago. So there we go. That's nice. But very, very quickly for this route, we get away from this motorway route or this corridor. So we are now in proper interurban. We're into the countryside. Um, the main route here steers off to the left, as you can see it towards Nijmegen, and it's a two-way cycle track in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, double the size of our greenway widths, I'd say. Well maintained, verges cut back, trees cut back, smooth, great, it's fantastic. The idea of this particular project was to give people the opportunity to commute between the two cities. I think there's something like 10, 15 kilometers between them, something like that. But if you've got an e-bike or if you're going into the office once or twice a week, it's kind of useful and it takes pressure off the motorway. So I understand that big part of this scheme was actually funded from the roads budget on the basis that we're reducing congestion on the motorway. So yeah, it's a Dutch. Let's just get something done that works. Um, Things do change. So we've gone from a two-way cycle track to kind of a bit of a local street. This is quite classic Dutch provision. It's a two-way road with cycle lanes, advisory cycle lanes. Drivers are kind of expected to stay out them unless they have to overtake or pass each other. It's kind of okay. It can get a bit sketchy. You can sometimes get close passes. The only way you can kind of change this arrangement is either make the bridge wider to put in cycle tracks, or do something at the network level to maybe make this one way for traffic. But there's plenty of these that exist, and I'd say these are probably getting towards the worst provision we see. But even so, traffic volumes are generally quite light, so it's not too bad. So the good bits pick up the bad bits. So carrying on, we've come back and swung next to the motorway again. And what's happening here is obviously you don't have direct access to houses off a motorway. So there's a parallel service road here, pretty narrow, serves hamlets and farms and stuff like that. Here's a cycle track, just some interesting protection there. Everything's kind of squashed in the space there. You can also see that it's lit. Now the motorway isn't lit, but the cycle track is. And these weird shaped columns that they're meant to represent bicycle chain. What do we call them? Links, don't we? Um, so let's get the mouse on the right side. Yes, these are meant to be bicycle chain links. Um, and what they're meant to do as well is detect you at night, so you don't have the whole thing lit up all the time. So if you're cycling between the cities, it picks you up, gives you a kind of a pulse of light as you go down the cycle track. But again, really, really smooth, really, really nice. So as we start to get onto the outskirts of Nijmegen, he's kind of just like a little country lane, really, accessing just a few farms and a few bits and pieces. So very, very quiet, not a problem at all to cycle. But again, it's lit. You know, this is a sort of main cycle route. This is a trunk cycle route between two cities, so it's lit and high quality. And just on the very outskirts, so the Dutch do have kind of big box retail parks and that kind of development. So here's a big cinema. Cycle track goes past it. So if you did want to watch a film on the way home, dead easy to pop into there. Tons of cycle parking. I've no idea what was being shown at the time. We were carrying on through, and then as we get to the outskirts of Nijmegen, this is a cycle street, so it's the cycle route, but very very locally people can drive in to access what are houseboats on the left hand side, um, floating on a big lake. So yeah, probably very very expensive houseboats there. And now we're hitting the edge of the city. This is start of a neighbourhood. Cycle track has priority over the local street. And what they've done here is instead of having a two-way road, it's two one-way roads separated by a bit of verge there. And that just allows people to cross one traffic lane at a time. So it gets the speeds down, makes things a bit easier for people cycling, just prioritises that safety. And here we go, two girls cycling along on their own, do what they need to do, not be ferried around by anybody. Cycle street proper, really, because we've got a raised central strip here. Very much cars are the guests here. You can cycle the full width of your lane as a cyclist. Drivers either have to find a gap and go around you or just wait. But traffic flow is very, very low there. And then we cross the river into Nijmegen proper. So you can see, so we're out the suburb going to the city. Um, this cycle track is bolted onto an existing railway viaduct. So that's the first photo of a train going across just to prove it. And the second photo is getting very, very close. And you can see here, this is the original bridge. And this is an extra piece which has been attached to the side, sort of cantilevered off the side of the railway bridge. All built as part of the fast cycle route between Arnhem and Nijmegen. So yes, it's very sensible. We've got river crossing anyway. Let's try and maximise it. Right, so we've done the kind of city to city thing here. I've got a couple of other little things to run through here. I'm going to look at Rotterdam, kind of northeast of the city, and then I'll go to the west of the city and just look at some of the differences here. So this is essentially, I'm pretty much on the city limit of Rotterdam in the northwest of the city, approaching the neighbourhood there. With flow cycle tracks as we're coming in. I think we've just crossed I think it's the A2 motorway, which always pops up. It's a long distance route. So literally you're heading right into the very edge of the suburbs here. Bit further on, here's another Dutch roundabout. Does exactly what I said at the previous one, except this one prioritises walking and cycling. So rather than having the crossing point set way back, it's about 5 or 6 meters from the circle area of the roundabout. But it just gives enough time for a driver to come off and stop if they need to. But they do have to stop because cycles and pedestrians have priority there. But again, speeds are managed, they're slow, everything's calm, and people tend to behave because of that. Then off getting into the suburbs more. I'll put this one in because it's just interesting that the cycle track here, it's going under a little road that goes into a level crossing. Just this is the metro right out on the northwest. But the cycle track, as you go under here, is lower than the canal level, and it's not flooded. So there we go. They maintain their pumps. But this neighbourhood, this cycle track route, It runs parallel to the canal right the way through the neighbourhood. So in parallel to this, you've got some fairly big roads that head into the edge of Rotterdam. But in terms of the neighbourhood, you can get in there, drive around, and come out again. But you can't wrap run through the whole thing. But you can wrap run if you're a cyclist because there's this high quality two-way cycle track that runs through the whole place. Bit further in towards Rotterdam, same neighbourhood, we get to the local centre, town centre, and again the cycle track goes straight through the heart of the town centre. So there's no arguments about delivery riders here. It's all properly demarked and it's where people are meant to go. Every so often there is a road crossing, but drivers have to give way to cyclists as they cross over the canal. And you can just see there's some shops on both sides. Quite often, you get some, I don't know, three, four, five-story flats above the shops. Bit more low rise here, but pretty common. And what was interesting, between the city limits and the city centre, we were probably cycling for the best part of an hour because Rotterdam is quite a big place. But all the time on this high quality cycle track. Another Dutch roundabout, this time quite unusual, being two-way, but this is a fairly big road. It's one of the more arterial roads going to Rotterdam. So it's two-way because that's what people would do if you had marked it that way. So it's, again, pragmatic, let people go where they need to go. Mopeds can be a bit of a pain, and there's all sorts of debates about how they should be restricted. But generally speaking, on the bigger roads, mopeds tend to go on the cycle tracks. And then yes, so this is going under a road which was opened, I think it was 2022. I can't remember quite. It's on the side of that bridge that marked into the concrete. But this is a big road. There's a massive interchange going on there. A bit of a expressway upgrade. They tried to disentangle some of the roads around Rotterdam. But as a result, cycling just gets this nice, easy route through there. So very quiet because of the big acoustic barrier that runs along the top of the motorway. Um, so yeah, they do build roads. I guess that's life really. For the Netherlands perspective, they are a transit country. Loads of people are driving lorries through to go somewhere else. So they kind of have to juggle that as well, especially on the edge of something like Rotterdam, which has all the port traffic. So we'll skip straight the way through the city because, interesting though it is, I'm going to contrast with Rotterdam West. So I am probably 10 minutes out of the city centre. To get here last week, we had to fight through the Rotterdam Marathon, which was good fun. But what it did give us is kind of this is the route we diverted to, but another cycle street. This is one way for traffic coming towards us, two-way for cycling, and cycling has distinct, smooth kind of cycle track areas. Maybe a bit pinched in there, but because it's one way, you're not bothered by traffic very often. And again, you can see the development. There's a bit of retail over on the side, and quite typically 4 or 5 stories of flats along some of the bigger roads as you go through. All the way heading out to Amsterdam West. Floating tram stop. I'm not sure anybody's complained about that. Kind of works. But what's really interesting here is the building to building distance is fairly narrow. I mean, everyone says, "Oh, Netherlands, massive wide streets and everything," but this is quite a main road. Um, but it's not too busy for traffic because that's been dealt with, and that goes on the motorways and the really big trunk roads. So consequently, general traffic and trams can mix. That's not a problem. It is a problem trying to mix cycles and trams. So wherever there's a potential point of conflict, rather than sending people out into the tram area, they've floated it. Pretty wide footways that they've kept that, which is really nice as you're walking along there, I guess. Really skinny passenger area, but really the intention here is you cross, get on, cross, get off, and everyone again kind of gets on with it really. Uh, and then another floating tram stop, different design. This one a bit more space. They've done something I think we would recognise more as a floating stop because really you don't want to be messing around with your bikes getting close to those tram tracks there. So you take it around the back and then you come back in. But from a cycling perspective, you've got cycle lanes. So it just marks advisory cycle lanes. And it's really awkward because you're right in the door zone. You're juggling between getting too close to the tram tracks, too close to the vehicles. It's not great. Um, it's not the utopia that we might think it is, but in the real conflict points, they have actually engineered that problem out there. Although, let's have one more floating thing. Um, yeah, floating zebra crossing. So again, we're not trying to get cyclists in to try and skirt the tram tracks. We're taking them around the back, so it's a bit safer. And actually, if you wanted to go and shop on the other side, you can pull in there, jump off your bike, and nip across. So yeah, kind of makes sense there. And then let's get really sketchy. Um, yeah, right in the door zone of these people here. And this particular section, and we're getting further out to the edge of Rotterdam West now. It was Sunday early afternoon. So many people pulling in and pulling out those spaces. Parallel parking, reversing in. It was, yeah, as bad as you get in lots of UK places. But you kind of put up with it because sooner or later it's going to give you a bit more space back. Right, we're nearly at the end. Coming out the other side. So we're past all the kind of really built up bit. We're heading towards the edge of the suburbs and almost the edge of the city. A lot more space, arterial type road with flow cycle tracks, nice and generous, nice and smooth. Zebra crossings every so often, and the housing is starting to change. So we're starting to lose the flats. We've got a few more larger houses here, and then eventually we hit the city limits and we're off and away. And I shall leave you one final slide. What you probably can just make out there is a weird looking patch, and this is me being really geeky with detail. Um, this is Dutch pragmatism here. So in the UK, and I know Leicester use a lot of red asphalt, which is good. Um, had arguments with maintenance engineers. Oh, what if I have to do a patch? What if something fails? Well, the Dutch tend to go in and they just stick block paving in. And the reason they do that is once they've done enough of it, they're either going to rebuild the street anyway, or they can justify getting a proper load of red asphalt to go and do all the patches in one hit. So that's why you see these absolutely everywhere across the country, because you can have a van full of block paving and just chuck it in the ground, and it's fine. It does the job. And that, folks, is me done. I hope that was okay.